Have you ever carried words you never got to say? A conversation that never quite ended? This podcast is a place for those stories, the ones that stay, the ones we live with quietly, long after the moment has passed. I'm Andrea Applewick, and this is If I Could Say One More Thing. This episode is about recognition. Not the kind that changes your life, the kind that steadies it. Jennifer had a brief encounter with someone who knew her before adulthood asked her to be smaller. Nothing was resolved, nothing was fixed, but something softened. This is Jennifer's story. The first time she said my name, I didn't recognize it as mine. Not because I had changed it. No reinvention montage, no dramatic haircut signaling a new era, but because it was the version of my name that belonged to permission slips and birthday cards written in careful cursive. Jennifer? Not the clipped Jen of work emails or customer service counters. This one was gentler, rounded, the Jenny that used to answer to bedtime. It happened on a Tuesday, which is when most life-altering moments choose to arrive, not on a holiday, not under a banner, just a day with errands and reasonable shoes. I was in Thousand Oaks, doing what I often do when I don't want to think, driving with purpose while having nowhere in particular to go. The radio was on low, one of those stations that plays songs you remember without remembering from where. Outside, the hills were dry and familiar, dotted with oak trees that looked like they had been standing there long before anyone thought to name subdivisions after them. I pulled into the shopping center I had been visiting since childhood, one of those beige California plazas that age quietly, like people who never move away. A nail salon, a dry cleaner, a smoothie place that had changed names but not fonts in 30 years. I went into a small independent bookstore that sold candles with literary puns and notebooks expensive enough to imply self-respect. You know the kind of notebooks. Thick paper, clean lines, the quiet suggestion that if you choose this one, you'll finally become the kind of person who finishes things. Buying a notebook is an act of faith bordering on fiction. I was standing in the aisle, holding one with a soft gray cover, when I heard it. Jennifer? Not spoken loudly, not urgently, just placed gently in the air, like a hand resting on a shoulder. I turned, half expecting my mother, or a ghost, or some earlier version of myself wearing Keds and holding a library card. Instead, there was a woman about my age, though age is a strange measurement when decades have passed. It's less about numbers and more about gravity, the way a person stands like they've learned how to hold their life. She wore a denim jacket, despite the warmth, her hair pulled back loosely, strands escaping like they had negotiated their way out. Her eyes were fixed on me with an expression that said, "I know you, but I'm giving you time to arrive. I'm sorry, I said, smiling in that polite, panicked way we smile when our brain is rummaging through old files. Do we? She laughed. Not loudly, not nervously, just enough to soften the moment. Oh, she said kindly, you don't remember me. She stepped closer, studying my face the way you study a photograph you almost recognize. It's me, she said, Marianne. And suddenly, the room tilted. Marianne. Not a friend, not family, something more specific, more intimate in a quiet way. My babysitter. Which sounds small until you remember that babysitters often witness your life before it becomes edited, before you learn which parts to hide, before sadness becomes private. Marianne had been there during the hours that didn't make it into the photo albums. Late afternoons, when the house smelled like reheated pasta and pencil shavings. Evenings when Jenny lined up my stuffed animals in careful rows and gave them instructions before bed. Marianne knew I cried quietly into my elbow so no one would feel responsible. She knew I asked too many questions right before sleep, as if answers might keep the dark from settling. Oh my God, I said, which is what you say when language gives up. Marianne smiled, relief and affection crossing her face. I thought it was you, she said. I almost didn't say anything, but when you did that thing with your head, I tilted it instinctively. That, she said, like you're listening for something you're not sure you're allowed to hear. My chest tightened. Hi, Jennifer, she said gently. Hi, I replied, suddenly unsure what to do with my hands. She asked if I had time for coffee. And even though adulthood teaches you to be suspicious of unplanned closeness, I said yes. We walked next door to a cafe that had been there forever. The kind of place that smells like coffee and burnt toast and forgiveness. Sunlight spilled in through the windows like it had nowhere better to be. Marianne ordered an iced latte. I ordered one too, out of habit. She looked at me for a long moment. You're here, she said, in Thousand Oaks. I live here, I said. I came back. She nodded slowly. I wondered, she said. This place has a way of holding on to pieces of us. Outside, a man loaded groceries into a minivan. A woman walked by talking to herself through a Bluetooth earpiece, conducting an invisible argument. How are you? Marianne asked. From anyone else, it would have been a greeting. From her, it felt like a question with history. I'm okay, I said. You know, busy, life. Marianne smiled. There you are, she said softly. What? That little dodge, she said. You used to do that when things felt like too much. I laughed. I did? Oh, yes, she said. You once told me your stomach ache was actually your feelings fighting. That sounded accurate. She stirred her coffee, then said, almost casually, "Do you remember setting the oven timer when we weren't cooking?" I shook my head. "You said it helped you know when things were supposed to end," she said. "Games, TV, sadness." I laughed, then stopped. "That's unnervingly on brand," I said. Marianne smiled, not triumphantly, just kindly. I thought of being 15, telling a teacher I was fine after a friend moved away, meaning, "Please don't ask me to talk about this in front of everyone." Jen had learned that language early. "I think," I said slowly, "I've spent a lot of time trying to be easier." Marianne tilted her head. "Easier for who?" I didn't answer right away. "You were never easy," she said. "You were attentive. You wanted to know what things meant. You didn't just want the cookie. You wanted to know why the cookie existed." Something in my face broke open then. Tears arrived without asking. Marianne didn't rush me, didn't apologize, didn't fix. "You know," she said gently, "I was 19 when I babysat you. I was terrified most of the time." I had never considered that. In my memory, she had been fully formed. "You used to notice," she continued. "If I was sad, you'd bring me a blanket. Ask me if I missed my mom." I stared at her. I don't remember that." "That's because you weren't doing it for credit," she said. "It was just who you were." I swallowed. I think I lost her," I said quietly. Marianne shook her head. "No," she said. "She's just tired." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You used to say something when you got overwhelmed," she added. "Hold my hand until my brain catches up." I laughed through tears. "That feels accurate." Marianne smiled. "You knew what you needed," she said. "You still do. You've just been taught to question it." We sat like that for a while. Outside, the light shifted through the oak trees. A breeze carried the smell of asphalt and eucalyptus. When it was time to go, Marianne stood and slipped her bag over her shoulder. "I'm really glad I said something," she said. "So am I," I replied, meaning it more than I could explain. She hesitated, then said, "If you ever feel like that again, overwhelmed, remember what you used to do." "And if there's no one?" I asked. Marianne smiled. "Then you hold your own hand," she said. "Not because you have to, because you deserve to." She left, blending back into the familiar landscape of my hometown, like someone who had returned something valuable without asking for thanks. I drove home slowly, past streets that knew my childhood bike routes, my teenage escapes, my adult returns. At home, I noticed I had lined my shoes neatly by the door, toes forward. I used to do that as a kid too, as if order could keep things from leaving. I sat at the kitchen table and placed one hand over the other. Hold my hand until my brain catches up. And slowly it did. Because sometimes healing isn't a breakthrough. Sometimes it's a return to the child who knew what she needed, to the teenager who'd learned how to survive quietly, to Jennifer, who is finally learning she doesn't have to do it alone. Sometimes the most important person who knew you before is the one you're becoming again. After I finished writing this story, I didn't want to ask Jennifer to explain it. Moments like this don't really want explanations. They tend to close in on themselves when you press too hard. Before we continue, a small note. Names and a few details have been softly changed, not to blur the truth, but to protect the quiet center of it. What matters here is what stayed. What I wanted instead was to ask what lingered after the coffee cups were cleared and the day went back to being a day. Jennifer didn't come looking for answers or closure. She came carrying something she couldn't quite name and hoping it might feel lighter if someone else helped hold it. So, this conversation isn't about what changed. It's about what softened. Jennifer, thank you for trusting me with this story.
Thank you for letting it be what it was.
When you first told me about meeting Marianne, you didn't say it was important. You just said it was strange. What made it stay with you anyway?
I think because it didn't ask anything of me. There was no lesson, no decision, no, okay, now what? It just happened, and then it stayed, which felt unusual.
You were seen by someone who knew you before you became Jen, before the shorter version of you took over. What do you think Marianne recognized?
Probably the part of me that doesn't rush, that still wants to sit with things. Jen gets things done. Jennifer feels them first.
Was there a moment, maybe even just a small one, when you felt your guard drop?
Yeah. When she remembered something about me that I didn't remember. That was disarming. It made me realize I hadn't lost that version of myself. I'd just stopped checking in on her.
So in the story, you talk about being fluent in saying, I'm fine, pretty early on. Do you remember when that actually started?
I don't remember deciding it. I think it just worked. It kept things moving. And once something works, you keep using it, even when it stops helping.
So you didn't leave that meeting with answers. But Did you leave with permission?
Yeah. Permission to be tired without explaining it, without fixing it. That felt rare.
When Marianne remembered you saying, "Hold my hand until my brain catches up," what was it like hearing that again?
Honestly, a little embarrassing. And then kind of heartbreaking. Because that kid knew exactly what she needed. And adult me keeps pretending she doesn't.
Since that day, have you noticed yourself doing anything differently, even in really small ways?
Yeah. I pause more. If I feel overwhelmed, I don't immediately go to, okay, what's wrong with me? Sometimes I just stop and think, all right, we're here. That's new.
Was there anything about Marianne that surprised you? Not necessarily as a caregiver, but more as a person?
That she remembered me at all. And not in a nostalgic way, in a present way. Like I was still someone she cared about, not just a memory she'd already closed.
So you asked me to write this story instead of telling it yourself. Why?
Because I didn't trust myself not to either shrink it or turn it into something performative. I needed someone who could stand close without taking over. Your voice felt steady, like it would let the moment stay quiet.
If someone listening feels like they've been living as a Jen for a long time, what would you want them to know?
That Jennifer's still there. She didn't disappear. She's just been waiting for things to slow down enough to be heard. And that wanting to be held, even emotionally, isn't weakness. It's awareness.
Thank you, Jennifer, for staying with this.
Thank you for not trying to fix it.
Some moments don't arrive to change us. They arrive to steady us, to remind us that who we were didn't disappear. She just learned how to wait. If this story stayed with you, maybe it's because there's a version of you that still knows what you need before you explain it. You don't have to resolve everything. You don't have to be braver than you are. Sometimes it's enough to notice what's softened and let that be the work. If you're carrying a story of your own, one that hasn't found its words yet, you're welcome to share it with me. You can find the story submission link in the show notes. I'm Andrea Applewick, and this has been If I Could Say One More Thing.